Pancreatic proteases are responsible for breaking down proteins into smaller amino acids. By the way, today's full moon, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. Today's full moon. So what do you think about with your clients and your patients when it's full moon? Parasites. Parasites. That's when they're the most active. That's when you can actually see, so that you want to have little children that are having more nightmares now. Little children that are having bad dreams, or they're crying in the middle of the night. And you say, what's wrong? I don't know. It's often because of parasites. But proteolytic enzymes, I have found I can use wormwood, I can use all of those wonderful herbs for parasites, and I do. But sometimes I feel that I haven't been able to clear parasites until I use an optimum level for that person of proteolytic enzymes. Okay? It made a difference. Does make a difference. So parasites, fungal forms, are responsible for keeping the small intestine free from parasites such as intestinal worms, yeast overgrowth, and bacteria. Parasites, fungal forms, and bacteria are proteins that additionally disguise themselves in a protein sheath that our bodies may view as normal. Proteases work by removing the protein shell. With the protective barrier down, your immune system can destroy the invading organism. Adequate HCl, something that I just learned in the past several months, is that when somebody comes in with first of all, remember who was the pediatrician that wrote, Is This Your Child? Anyway, she was the gal who went in her book on toxic forms in our environment. It's about page 91. She tells you that we now have an average of a low white blood cell count. And you look at blood chemistries, I'm sure Dr. Lund can tell, you'll see frequently that the white blood cell count is low, to the low side. I learned that if I keep increasing their HCl, I can bring up the white count. Now, I don't have a scientific explanation for that, but that is something that I've learned by watching blood chemistry. Remember that using hydrochloric acid, and there's different forms, but hydrochloric acid is something that you take during the meal, and that you can keep on increasing it until you feel warmness in your stomach. Then you should back down by 1. But HCl makes a difference with that immune system, so that the immune system seems to come up with it. And I don't know, have you ever experienced anything like that, Dr. Weiner?
HCl immune system. Well, we have a big problem now with so many people on antacids. That's creating a whole cascade of problems.
That's exactly right. And
well, first of all, you know that 50% of the immune system's in your digestive tract.
That's right.
And
or
your
more
stomach
than
is open to taking in all these pathogens from eating and drinking and inhaling, and yet then you kill off the hydrochloric acid, then you have no protection.
But the thing is, if you have the sufficient hydrochloric acid in the stomach, you've killed them off. In other words, that's what your stomach is a sterilizer of that debris.
So when they're on the antacids, then they don't have it.
That's correct. So that's why, and I'm grateful that they finally decided to black box the antacids that people have been on for years and tell them that they should not be on them for more than 60 days after people have been on them for 10 years. That's pretty scary.
Dr.
Yes?
So that would be in our Betazyme formula. So
Betazyme?
Yep, Betazyme.
Excellent.
Hydrochloric acid.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, so Betazyme it is. Low stomach acid, which we know is hypochlorhydria, affects an estimated 47% of the population. Because most people, when they have heartburn, it's a lack of enzymes. It's not because you want to use an antacid. Use some pure, good digestive enzymes, and you'll find out that the body is able, you don't have to have heartburn, or else use a spoon of apple cider vinegar. Apple cider vinegar will help you a great deal. And there's so many good things that you can do with that. Okay, hypochlorhydria, common in those with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. They know that the stomach must be acidic in order to absorb B12. Hypochlorhydria can lead to allergies. What is allergies? Allergies is because the liver did not get to produce its antihistamine. Your liver produces over 5,800 enzymes, and 80% of the enzymes that your liver makes needs what? Magnesium. Magnesium you get from your green vegetables. Magnesium is something that you really want to be aware of. Now there is a brand new magnesium, I'm sure you've read about already, the new magnesium that now is able to cross the blood-brain barrier. I'm really excited about that because we need magnesium, because remember it was Hans Nieper from Germany who actually showed that magnesium and potassium were the two critical things that would actually help in a heart attack, and we could actually stop the process from going. Hans Nieper stored all of his data here in the United States in the A.K. Keith Brewer, B-R-E-W-E-R, Science Library in Wisconsin. And he showed, because remember, he was the man who I sent over 100 people to, I know, for MS because he had an 80% cure rate. And because what he did was he learned to know that these enzymes, he used the orotic acid, which is the orotates, to go and coat each molecule of that mineral, and that made all the difference in the world as to how that mineral was absorbed in the body. This is HGH, human growth hormone, and how it is something that is so essential for normal muscle metabolism and repair. Many people believe that as we age, the amount of human growth hormone in our body decreases. In fact, the difference in growth hormone levels between adults and adolescents is not in the amount of HGH, but in its release. Adequate amounts of blood protein levels will stimulate the release of HGH from the pituitary gland. The inability to digest proteins would result not only in a reduction of the amount of HGH, but also in the release of HGH from the pituitary. So in the study entitled Dietary Protein Restriction Impairs Both Spontaneous and Growth Hormone Releasing Factor Stimulated Growth Hormone Release in the rat, researchers concluded that these results demonstrate that lack of dietary protein, 1, blunts spontaneous pulsatile GH release, 2, attenuates GH responsiveness to GRF challenge, and 3, reduces pituitary GH content and size. Protein digestion and celiac. To gluten or not to gluten. How many of you are subscribers to Wise Traditions? Wise Traditions is a magazine put out by Weston A. Price. Last summer they put an excellent article that you should Google their website and go to and read. It's called To Gluten or Not to Gluten. The reason why is because it's giving you another way of thinking. Isn't it interesting that now we found out that if you went and ate a gluten-free diet, remember back the doctor who wrote the book Wheat Belly, cardiologist, in the back of his book he told you that if you lived on a gluten-free diet, he guarantees you that you will gain weight and that you will also become a diabetic. Because what is gluten-free? Your starchy things such as rice flour, your tapioca flour, potato starch. In other words, these things all convert into sugar in the body. So this article, Rethinking the Gluten-Free Craze, they're not saying go back to it. What they do is they're telling you then about such things as einkorn and emmer. Einkorn is a type of ancient grain because why? They found out that we actually become deficient in certain nutrients in the body if we don't have something like this. Einkorn wheat or else emmer, E-M-M-E-R. Those are two grains that are ancient grains. They are now, emmer is now available here by Frankfurt Farms, north of Pittsburgh here, so that it usually was on the West Coast. I had to have it shipped in from Washington State for the last couple of years, but now we can get it here locally. But einkorn and emmer are some things that are so important for you to realize that they can be considered. Now, somebody who's celiac, they cannot use those. That's not even an option. But many people need some type of source for their B vitamins and their B proteins. Okay, I would like to, this is about homocysteine, and I put a bunch of slides at the end of this one or the other one that are just on research that I happen to crave that kind of information, and I like to refer to it. Homocysteine is inflammation. Inflammation overall is the biggest contributor to autoimmune issues. Food is medicine. We need to eat adequate protein and have sufficient fermented foods, which contains enormous amounts of enzymes. How many of you eaten some fermented food today? Did you have any kombucha? Did you have any? Okay, good. Dr. Kat did. Okay, so that you want to have, because Wild Fermentation is a book that you can learn to know from. The Complete Idiot's Guide to Fermenting Foods is another one. Truly Cultured is an awesome book that Nancy Lee Bentley wrote. I helped her put some of this information together. Real Food Fermentation, The Art of Fermentation. These are wonderful. And of course, you can go to Weston A. Price and read more in Sally Fallon's book, Nourishing Traditions, about fermentation, because you can ferment fruits, you can ferment vegetables. And not everybody has to be German and eat sauerkraut. But the issue is having good fermented. Make sure when you're telling your client or your patient about fermented vegetables, some people think that going home and cooking up the kraut is the way they're going to eat it. It has to be raw. It has to be raw and fermented. And remember, it's so easy to do. You can do it. You take a head of cabbage and you cut it in half, and you go and chop it up, and then put it in a dish that a bowl, I would call it a bread bowl. It would be a heavy bowl so that you can stomp it, because you want to put salt on and stomp it until you get juice coming out from the kraut. Now, we did this in 10-gallon crocks as a kid, and we would, so that we need to go back to this again. Our parents and grandparents, probably just your grandparents did this kind of thing, and we need to go back to having fermented vegetables because we need to initiate the enzymes. I tell people, please don't use the very same type of probiotic in the gut always. Change the type that you're using. Rotate the type, because it really does make a difference. So that raw sauerkraut contains protease and DNase 1. Look at your other beet kvass. Beet kvass is delicious. It's a wonderful drink that you can take in. Remember, just because food is marketed as healthy doesn't mean it necessarily is. Natasha Campbell McBride was the woman who, she has lectured numerous times here in the States. She lives in England. She was trained in Russia. And her first book was Gut and Psychology Syndrome. And she is telling you about something that she experienced firsthand, because her son was born. She was a surgeon, and she's a medical doctor and surgeon. Anyway, her son was born, and she was told that he should probably be put into a home because he will never grow up normally. And so what she did was she went home and she started cooking. And she started cooking and started finding out how she can, this is a new book that follows the GAP diet, GAPS, G-A-P-S, Heal Your Gut. And it's all about, this is a book that is a little pricey, but it has some gorgeous pictures in for people who can't comprehend that they could make delicious food from wonderful vegetables and having good ferments. Because the basic book that she does here in teaching you about people that have depression, people that have schizophrenia, bipolar, people that have ADD, ADHD, dyspraxia, all these problems can be changed by changing the diet. Her other book that she wrote, which is very interesting, is Put Your Heart in Your Mouth. She's telling you that angina, atherosclerosis, high blood pressure, arrhythmia, heart attack, stroke, peripheral vascular disease all can be changed just by changing the diet. Okay? It really can be happened. So, canola oil, you all know that that's bad. You already know that it was something that was never invented for human consumption. It was only ever made to lubricate farm machinery. But here in the United States, we took it and we started making it. And don't even think that in a health food store that you'll have just only healthy foods there. Sometimes you'll still find things there made with canola oil. Do not buy it, because canola oil derived from Canadian oil depletes the body of vitamin E. Trans fats and candle wax. When William Procter and James Campbell started their company, Procter & Gamble, they hired a chemist, E.C. Caster, to develop a process to hydrogenate cottonseed oil. This process ensured the shortening would remain solid at room temperatures. This was in 1911. initial purpose was to create a cheaper substance to make candles than expensive animal fats. When electricity began to diminish the candle market, since the product looked like lard, they began to sell it as food, known as Crisco, crystallized cottonseed oil. That's one way trans fats became a part of the American diet. Isn't that a crime? Trans fats, produced when liquid vegetable oils are turned into solid fats through hydrogenation. They have a part of our diets that are over 100 years and there's no safe level. Cities, towns, states, and countries are banning trans fats linked to depression, infertility, obesity, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, liver dysfunction, cancer, reduced immune function, and diabetes. The human enzyme lipase, which is responsible for breaking down fats in our bodies, ineffective against lipids in the trans configuration. So anyway, there's many ways that we can see. Here we see that there is no safe level for human consumption, and one of the worst hidden dangers in our food supply. Avoiding trans fats so that few people eat one serving of anything. Look at what is one serving on a package, and you'll find out, and I hope that you're not shopping in a grocery store. If you are, you know that you only shop along the outer wall where there is freezers or where there is refrigeration for produce, not up and down the aisles, because things that are cardboard boxes and tin cans are not real food. A processed food's future, so that you have, if you eat something completely devoid of vitality, your body will need to give up its stored enzymes and energy to process it. And Dr. William Donald Kelly was the man, and remember at New York, Dr. Nick Gonzalez, thank you. Dr. Nick Gonzalez was the one who got the $5 million grant that went on to prove Kelly's work. And One Man Alone is a book that he wrote. He wrote several of them. But in his book, he's telling you that this is something that was absolutely refuted by the Cancer Society of today. And if you go to cancerdecisions.com and see the movie that Ralph Moss has made, because remember in the 1970s, Ralph Moss was a science writer for Sloan Kettering. And he was there when they came to him and said, we have to change how this research comes out. And that was on B17, Laetrile. Laetrile was something that back then I didn't have any fear of God in me at all. I was ready to do it as IV any way you could do it. I just had my nursing degree, but that didn't bother me. And so that, but I wouldn't do any of that today. But we know that B17 works. But why? Because it was an enzyme. And enzymes are key to this and how it works. So eat organic, eat local. We're seeing the first generation where children will not live as long as their parents. Many people think that switching to a healthier diet is too expensive. What is your health really worth? What is it worth to you? Sequence of autoimmune process. Necrotic tissues. Anyway, this goes through the process of the sequence of autoimmune process. Prednisone, listening to this morning of the child that had the psoriasis. You know, many people don't realize that children that are given a steroid, it stunts their growth. It stunts their growth, not just suppressing their immune system, so that we're talking about something that's very, very harmful to their body. This goes through a whole plethora of all kinds of research that I absolutely love to read. Treating autoimmune diseases through restoration of antigen-specific immune tolerance. Ideally, autoimmune disease therapies would uniquely target the specific autoreactive lymphocyte populations while leaving unperturbed the rest of the immune system. By the way, one of the books that I wrote on my book list for you is, I think it was the last one on the list. It was the first book that was a textbook in the United States on the lymphatic system. And that book, you need to be telling your clients and your patients that they need lymphatic drainage. Yes, using the mini trampoline is very good. Doing that is wonderful. They can walk in place, they can jump, but that is absolutely critical. Lymphatic drainage is not a massage. Lymphatic drainage is actually that French, that medical doctor, he lives here in the Southwest, but that medical doctor, he's also a DO, who actually went and showed how the lymph, getting that lymph, it's very light touch therapy, very light touch. And you can do it of the head, you can do it of the entire body, and it's something that is profound in what it's able to do. And if you don't, you can probably look for that book on Amazon. I would think you might be able to buy it there. But it is something that is very worthwhile. Lymphatic drainage is so important. You can use the homeopathic remedies for lymphatic drainage, but you also need to know that that is something that is very important. Okay, parts of the brain affected by autism. Autism. Why do kids do what they do? Is it just immunizations? I think you should talk to Dr. Kat over here and find out some of the things that she does at her office for autistic kids. I think you'd find it interesting. I'm sorry, Dr. Kat Mazzarelli. Okay. Okay, so anti-brain antibodies in children with autism and their unaffected siblings. Results suggest that children with autistic disorder and their siblings exhibit differences compared to controls in autoimmune reactivity to specific epitopes located in distinct brain regions. Anti-brain antibodies are associated with more severe cognitive and behavioral profiles in Italian children with autism spectrum disorder. Do you know that by 2020, now this is 2015, by 2020, they say that we will have 1-to-1. 50% of our kids will be autistic. Now, if this doesn't make the chills go up and down your spine, I don't know what will. This is a problem, and we need to realize. Now, years ago, many years ago, the only way I knew, when a kid came in that I didn't even know the word autism then, this would have been in the 70s, and they came into my office and they were jumping or tearing the whole place apart, I would immediately go and get, and this was just what I knew then, a jar of essential fatty acids and have them take a little tiny, like a shot glass, and I need you to drink this. Either I put some grape juice with it or something, but I need them to drink this. So I could get my review done, so I could sit and talk to the parents, because it would calm down the kid enough to make them sit down, because otherwise they're running all over the place. Well, now we know other things that we can do, and that can really help them to settle down right away. The body is amazing if we learn to listen to it. This is in Rheumatology, Rheumatology International, back from 2005. And it's telling you the prevalence of autoantibodies against cartilage, intermediate layer. So this is from Lancet. Autoantibodies as predictors of disease. So many diseases, these autoantibodies are found in serum samples many years before the disease onset. That's why we do things like a CA profile. Dr. Schindel in Florida does this urine and blood test that is able to tell us years ahead about degenerative disease, and you don't need to wait for a CEA count to go high. It doesn't have to. Okay. So moms with autoimmune diseases are more likely to have kids with autism. Yes, we heard that this morning even. Autoantibodies to the cerebellum in children with autism associated with behavior. This comes from the Brain, Behavior, and Immunity Science Direct. This is a good abstract. Another person, if you'd like to converse with somebody who's really good on science, is Dr. Narula, Narula. Dr. Narula is, he's out of North Carolina, and he is somebody who I've had lots of conversations with, because he's not a practicing physician, but he's a science researcher, and does I wanted to give you a website, thought I had it here, that he is able to go and, here it is, Narula. His email is ANARULA, then the number 1, @nc.it.com. Narula Research. He's in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. A very worthwhile man to talk to because he is somebody who has done some awesome things with Ayurvedic herbs and how they apply to the body. Principles governing appearance of brain antibodies in serum of schizophrenics. Schizophrenic, you know about orthomed.org, the Orthomolecular Society out of Canada. And it's probably Dr. Hoffer is the one who started that organization, and that is where psychiatrists and psychologists should be checking in to find out that you can change the body nutritionally. Having depression, having suicidal tendencies, having schizophrenia. Sometimes a schizophrenic patient, you have to wait until they're able to come into the office. And even if you're in the middle, and usually happens on a busy office day, when that person is finally willing to come in. And then you know that you've got to take them in right away into your office because the mood may not stay there long enough for them to stay. So that, and then I use homeopathy to start getting them back on track because these are not people that can be depended on to go and take some supplements every day. A schizophrenic, they're here today, they're gone tomorrow. And so that you need to bring these dear people back. From New Jersey, a medical doctor who came to my office and lectured in the early 1970s. Anyway, he wrote books on minerals, but he would always bring 2 or 3 people with him as his assistants. And these were people that were in state hospitals that were in a catatonic state. That means that they just sat there and stared straight ahead. He brought them out of this by using mega nutrition. I made a product from some of his work, from his knowledge to me, and that's called, I call it Ella's Brain Food, but it's using niacinamide and vitamin C and B6 in brain powder because this is something that actually is very helpful to the body. But schizophrenia is something that is increasing majorly, and one of the reasons why we see it, I believe, is because of our use of drugs, of street drugs. But anyway, it's also a problem because of the diet, and so that it is the kinds of foods eaten, that we're eating the kinds of foods. So don't think that suddenly McDonald's became a good place to eat necessarily. Incidence of anti-brain antibodies in children with obsessive compulsive disorder. OCD is a big issue. Sometimes we see it in executives in a business and they're asking for help. They know that they checked the door, whether it was locked or not. They checked it 4 times and they still go back and think, I better check it again. So that this is something that is an imbalance in the body and you can get it to be rebalanced. These are part of what is happening. Autoantibodies and chronic fatigue syndrome. And this is in the new blood test for Parkinson's. Parkinson's is one of the problems that I have found most to be related to the pesticides on produce. I learned that the hard way. I had a gentleman come to me from Florida and he had the symptoms of Parkinson's, and I asked him what was his profession. Well, he's retired, but he always worked in the produce department. And he was the produce manager. And I said, well, so what did you do? He said, well, I tell you what, some of the produce comes in and it smells bad because of the stuff that they use on it to spray it or whatever so that the produce will last longer. I said, that doesn't sound right. He said, yes, but I've done it for 30-some years. And I said, well, we're going to do a test and find out whether you have pesticide poisoning or not. There's a homeopathic remedy that I use for that. And sure enough, on hair analysis, on blood chemistry, hair analysis showed very high levels of these metals. But remember, if it shows up in your blood, it's already so very, very bad, so that you certainly would be better off to detect it in the hair first. But anyway, the man is still alive today. The man does not have Parkinson's, but it's something that does not mean that everyone is just from pesticides, but I want you to realize how pesticides are so very, very harmful. Anti-brain antibodies in alcoholic patients is another challenge. Getting the person to get rid of the alcohol. So that if you have an alcohol-based herbal remedy and you have an alcohol-based remedy, make sure that you're not giving that to your alcoholic patient, and also make sure that you're not giving them the herb hops, H-O-P-S. You'll drive them back to that. But isn't it interesting that the people that go to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, what is the chief thing that they drink there? Coffee? And what's from coffee? Coffee is one of the highest pesticide-ridden foods. Wonder if that has any effect. That they say a certain percentage goes back to the alcohol again. Add Alzheimer's list to the list of autoimmune diseases. I'm using some Ayurvedic herbs that can be very, very helpful. And autoantibodies in breast cancer, their use as an aid to early diagnosis, very important. That's why we use thermography. Thermography is measuring the temperature in the body, and it's actually telling us as to whether that area has heat to it. It's telling us then as to whether we have a problem. Up to 8 years before a mammogram could ever show the problem, and it's no radiation. Autoantibodies in patients with carcinoma of the breast and how it goes on. Diversity and autoimmunity against retinal, neuronal, all these kinds of problems. Intraocular inflammation. Remember that now they're doing more of this for glaucoma, that they're using injections directly into the eye, not just releasing the pressure in the eye. And also when we think of vision and how it can deteriorate with age, this does not have to be. This is absolutely, I stand as a testimony that for the past 8 years, my eye doctor can prove that I have had a decrease in my lenses for every single year for 8 years in a row. And he said that doesn't happen to people that are in their 70s. And I said, well, I'm here to prove something differently. Because when I was 21, I was told that I'd be blind at a very young age. Okay, evidence of an autoimmune pathogenesis. This is about alopecia. Some people are scared that they are losing their hair. Yes, Jamie, you want to ask a question?
I realize every patient's different, but can you go through what a typical autoimmune or immune protocol would be?
Yes, the first thing that I would do is to make sure that I'd want to check the gut, and I'd want to check to see if they had sufficient hydrochloric acid. I'd want to check as to whether they had sufficient enzymes and probably proteolytic enzymes to be taken, as I said earlier, when they wake up and when they go to bed at night. I'd want to make sure then that they had enough of the antioxidants, and earlier what I said about the fermented cod liver oil and your essential fatty acids, absolutely critical. I'd also want to make sure that they were measure their vitamin D, because many doctors are not measuring the vitamin D. That's very important. After that, I would go after something that's more whole food in the way of nutrients, and using your protein powder and that type of thing is very important to get that to rebuild.
I know you use a lot of the X-Flame. Do you use that for immune issues also, or inflammation?
X-Flame is awesome. It's a product that you can use, and often I'll find that some people, and that depends on the person, some people do well with the powder, others do well with the capsules. But X-Flame is an excellent, excellent source to start breaking down the inflammation, yes. And inflammation is the whole key of everything as to what's going on. Yes. Okay, any questions? You're either bored to death or went to sleep.
Don't forget to mention about the GMO thing.
Oh, no, yes, did everyone get their, I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to walk in front of the camera. GMO, did you get your need to know GMO? This is an organization, you didn't get one? There was a pack of them back here at the back of the room. Are there any back there yet? Yes, okay. They'll bring some up here in the front row. They don't have any. Okay, but anyway, this is GMO Free Pennsylvania. A friend of mine started this organization down near Philadelphia, Anne Marie Cantrell, and they are absolutely adamant about trying to make sure that we have awareness on genetically modified food. You want to know whether your food has been genetically modified or not. It's pretty scary as to know what is happening with these foods. Any other questions? Yes.
A lot of people are asking during lunch, they were asking, do you normally do the GI complete or X-Flame? What would you do first? You only the gut, or are you looking to reduce inflammation? What's your approach?
Well, my approach would be, depending on the person, but definitely I go to the gut first. And then after that, sometimes if I feel that there's heavy metals involved, then I'll do a hair analysis and start addressing it. But usually, or like I said about the person with the metal in their mouth was full of it, and they had 7 root canals. I said that they had to go to the dentist first before I could even start, because I started with homeopathy and doing a deep acting remedy to start helping the body to start rebuilding, because that would really make a difference. The other thing sometimes that you have the person to be so sick that I can only use something like an Herbalix deodorant, which is Herbalix is made out of it's a little stick deodorant, and you only use at nighttime, and it's used along all of the underneath the arm and down the arm, down the side of the chest, because it is a way to pull the lymphatic toxins out at nighttime. Then they shower off in the morning. And this is something that is very relevant to helping the body to actually start cleansing and rebuilding. Other times, sometimes if the person is able or wishes to, doing other types of testing are very, very, now I am disappointed that Metamatrix no longer exists as a lab, because I really loved their GI series. Doctor's Data does an excellent job of that now, and they actually have taken the test to a new level. And that's a stool sample that's able to show you what's happening from the mouth through to the rectum. And so it's actually showing me whether there is candida, whether there's fungi, whether there's yeast, whether all of these things exist there, and how we can get rid of them. Yes?
I have a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
I was listening to a health show that said if you've had a stroke, if someone gives them cayenne pepper, as soon as they have it, it brings it back.
Dr. Christopher, John R. Christopher used to stand in front of an audience, and he's gone now, but he used to stand in front of an audience, take a big glass of water and a tablespoon of cayenne pepper, put it into the glass of water and drink it right down. And yes, I've heard that kind of thing, but I tell you what, I have not had an experience of where I've been able to, where somebody was having that kind of an episode happening, that they are able to drink a glass of cayenne pepper or take the cayenne pepper. So I'm not of the opinion that it wouldn't work. My issue is that many times you can't do that at that time. There's such a upset that the person does not drink that down right then. So it's a really good idea. But the thing is, cayenne is something that you always put in a bag. By the way, use wax paper bags, don't use plastic. And a wax paper bag, you can get cut-right wax paper baggies and put some cayenne pepper in there and put that in your knapsack when you go hiking, because if anybody has a puncture wound or anything like that, or cut and is bleeding, you can stop the bleeding by pouring cayenne pepper right on the spot, and it'll stop it instantly. And it won't hurt them, it won't burn or anything like that, but it really helps. What's the second part?
This is for myself. All my inflammation markers were okay. Homocysteine, C-reactive protein, lipoprotein in a way. The first time in years, I have hyperhidrogen, and I'm taking fish oil, I'm taking Nado, I'm taking,
Has anybody run a Cyrex lab test on you to find out sensitivities? I would start there. Cyrex, C-Y-R-E-X. It's out of the West Coast. Cyrex Labs. It's one of the best places that I know of to go and test for sensitivities.
Can you recommend anything also to bring it down?
I want to know what else is happening. I'm sorry. I really would want to know what else is happening. But that certainly is something that's an issue, and I'm glad that you're observing that even though the other numbers are okay, that is a marker, and it certainly is telling us something. Yes?
You have great results with the X-ray for a lot of the inflammatory markers. Have you tried that?
I guess I could do that. I'm not on any
Yeah,
I've never tried it.
Yeah, the X-flame is really something that it really does work for many of those things. Yes, it may make a big difference. Any other questions? Okay. Obviously, I'm not going to get into the other set. And I apologize. I don't know where to stop with this or to go, because I wanted to show you something. These I tagged on the end in case you were interested in the research. I love to read research. Okay. How do you go? Thank you, Mike. Yes, please. Internal Bliss is a cookbook that you should have in your office because it's a cookbook that does not use any grains, it doesn't use any dairy, and it doesn't use any sugar. And it's a very simple cookbook, so it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it's something that for many people that want to go and understand more about the foods that they're eating, and they want to cut out grains and cut out dairy. Now, I don't mean that everybody has to be off dairy, but some people should for a period of time just to see how their body is able to work. It's amazing, some people, when they cut out these things for 30 days, they actually see how much different their body works. But this is a book that doesn't require the dear mother or the dear cook of the house to go to the store and buy a whole bunch of new ingredients. This is using basic good whole foods. Okay. Anybody want to go home? Come on. What would you are what you eat, drink, think, and believe. But the thing is this, is that I often use because I was born and raised when we had, my dad had dairy cows, and we actually used a four-legged stool to go and strip the cow at the end. If you don't know what, you're not a farmer, well, that means that after you take the milkers off the cow, then you strip the cow further with hand strip the cow to go and get the rest of the milk. But anyway, this stool will not stand up unless it has all four legs. And so that you are what you eat, drink, think, and believe. Standard American diet, you already know that we are not what our grandparents ate. Typical day in America. Food is medicine. Food acts as medicine to maintain, prevent, and treat disease. Absolutely it does. Nutrients give our bodies instructions about how to function. The United States ranks 9th in life expectancy. Do you know that we are now at 40 for a state of health? 40. Do you know 39 countries? I don't know 39 countries that I could name that I would consider healthier than us. Now that's really sad. We have a workforce plagued with absenteeism and reduced productivity because of chronic health problems, including depression. 78% of healthcare expenditures are for the treatment of chronic disease. Many researchers now believe that these problems are partly related to diet. Do you think? Duh. Animal products. Nutrients supplied by animal foods. You already know these. Calcium. And remember, you want a lactate type of calcium so that you're able to get it from vegetables, so that you're able to go and take it. Then you don't need to worry. Nobody has to take 1,200 milligrams of calcium a day and think that's going to stop your bones from breaking down. Vitamin D is more important than calcium. Proteins. We already talked a lot about proteins and how they work. Grains, legumes. And by the way, every one of you soak your grains and soak your quinoa and soak your millet. And you soak that before you would cook it, right? Yes. Because you know that the phytic acid in nuts and seeds have to be broken down. And I'm telling you, many people who have never done it, and then I tell them, go home and soak your almonds, get a bag of almonds, soak them in water for about 5 hours, and then you go and take them out of the water, put them on a dehydrator, or if you don't have a dehydrator, put them on a cookie sheet, and put them in the oven about 175 degrees. And by the way, before you put them in the oven, go and sprinkle some garlic on them, or else some cinnamon or some salt, and put them in the oven. Now they're crisp and they're crunchy. You can put them in a glass jar. You can store them in the freezer if you want to. But the thing is, if you soak the nuts and seeds and grains, you're going to find out you can digest it so much better. Sometimes people can't digest this stuff because you didn't make it the way it needs to be made. We're the only country in the world that does not automatically soak nuts, seeds, and grains before we eat them. Now something's wrong with that. Okay? Do it and you'll find out that the nuts taste a whole lot better and digest a whole lot better. Okay. Whole grains. So they do all kinds of wonderful things for the body. Examples of sources of beneficial phytonutrients are all these wonderful foods. I was going to talk to you about how you can take some of these foods and use onions. I already told you that you can cut it in half and let it open, but you know that you can make onion juice or potato juice. You can kill strep. If you go and take a potato, A white potato, you go and put it in the blender or best in a juicer and make 3 ounces of potato juice, and you have to drink it within 3 minutes, and you absolutely can kill strep virus. Okay, it works. It absolutely works. And you can absolutely find the body to be so much healthier. Yes, you can use vitamin C, but you make sure that you're trying to get vitamin C that's not from ascorbic acid, which is from corn, which is frequently GMO. Lemon is something that cleanses the liver. So then when we get tired of drinking water and you say, oh, I want something else to drink other than water, then you make sure that you are having something that puts some lemon into the water, or else you could put some lime into the water, because lemon is something that is very, very beneficial to the liver, and it's neither acid nor alkaline in the body. It does a lot of things. Frequently I give my phone number out to anybody that I take care of, and so I'll get a phone call crazy times in a 24-hour period, and they'll say, what am I going to do about this? And often there's a food that can actually make the difference. I hope that you know about North American Herb and Spice, because Cass Ingram wrote a book, The Cure is in the Cupboard, and he writes about oregano. And he's telling you that there's many different types. The cure is in the forest, the miracle of wild oregano, and natural cures for health diseases, Because Cass Ingram is a osteopathic doctor who has done some pretty awesome research to show that there's a difference in oregano, that you want the oregano from the Mediterranean, and that the oil of oregano, putting a drop in the sole of each foot, can really make a difference as antifungal. And yes, you can do things like tea tree oil, those are fine, but often they're not enough to kill some fungus. But remember, the fungus does not just come to the toenails, it is something that comes from the inside of the body. So go back to the gut and start working at fixing the gut. Radish always helps those things such as your gallbladder. Flushes the gallbladder to prevent the formation of stones. Radishes, go to winter root soup is a name of a recipe that's in Nourishing Traditions, and it is made from parsnips, it's made from rutabagas, it's made from all kinds of the winter root vegetables. And then I go and take like a daikon radish and I grate it the way you would grate cabbage, and I put that on top of that creamy soup and eat it. That is awesome food. Make real food for your family. You're going to find out that it's very worthwhile. Oh, by the way, my mother, when she got her first electric stove, she burned her hand by putting her hand, she was testing it to see if the current was on. So she had these rings on her hand. And so what did I do as a young girl? I took a potato, cut the potato in half, and then took the knife and scraped across the potato, and we put that on top of the burn because it took the heat out of the burn right away. So that a potato can really help for a burn. And yes, there's all kinds of things like learning to know about John Kime's work and with burns, and that's another whole chapter. But we'll talk about soaking potatoes, decreases starch. On the fungi diets, we always make sure that people, if they're going to eat potatoes, if they're permitted, then they have to peel them and soak them for 12 hours in order to get rid of some of the starch. Peppermint, you heard about this morning. Cayenne pepper is antifungal. Cayenne pepper will clot the blood or thin the blood. That's the beauty of nutrition, is that you're able to learn from all of these things. I think that 3:30 has come and I should stop. And we need to go. There's so many wonderful things. And you know that the only cleaning material you need in your house is hydrogen peroxide and vinegar. White vinegar is the only thing that will clean windows really well, but apple cider vinegar is something that is so very, very beneficial to the body. And so that learning to know how vinegar can be used in many, many ways, and it certainly will take the place of an antacid. And if anything at all, I hope that you're able to convince your clients, patients to get off of antacids, because there are things that are absolutely, and in the dark print, read from the print of what it says. It tells you what it actually does, and that's contributing to degenerative disease. Coconut oil, you know, kills viruses and bacteria, fungi and yeast, kills tapeworms, lice, giardia, and other parasites. Coconut oil has so many, and the coconut flour is wonderful. Gelatin making bone broth, using the new nourishing traditions, nourishing broth. Bone broth is now becoming a popular thing on the West Coast. They are now, instead of having just coffee shops, they have broth shops. Yep. So that bone broth is really something that is so, but get the bones from an animal that was grass-fed. That's absolutely critical. Celery. Celery is your bone food. In other words, celery sticks is something that actually contributes to the bones. Sauerkraut, we already talked about. Avocados. Avocados are awesome to eat and to use. It helps the brain. This is your monounsaturated fats. Ginger. Ginger, pure ginger is something that helps with pain. It really is a wonderful thing. You pair it with garlic and it really works wonders in the body. Garlic, of course, is something that will lower blood pressure and it will certainly help. Lavender is something that calms the body, and I think we're going to stop with thyme. Chamomile. Chamomile tea, remember you give a child chamomile tea to fall asleep at nighttime because it's something that is so very beneficial. Dandelions. Why do you think that watercress right now, this is March, watercress is in the creeks and streams? Because this time of year, you need the greens to start cleansing the body. That's why you, last month, you made sassafras tea. This month, you use watercress. Next month, you get dandelion. God made the world in a way so in the fall, you have all the orange vegetables, the pumpkin, the squash, to cleanse the body, getting you ready for wintertime. Anyway, that's another hill story. Okay, thank you so much.